3 passengers dead, 1 fighting for their life in intensive care. A rare, rodent-borne virus confirmed aboard a cruise ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and the World Health Organization scrambling to coordinate a response while medical evacuations were reportedly delayed. This is a story about a deadly outbreak, yes, but it's also a story about whether our global health institutions are actually capable of responding when something genuinely unexpected happens at sea. Joining me now are Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor, and James Chen, our geopolitical analyst. Sophia, let me start with you. Is this a failure of the cruise industry, a failure of international health bureaucracy, or both?
Thanks, Emma. Let's be direct about what we're looking at here. 3 people are dead from a pathogen with a case fatality rate of between 36 and 38% when it reaches the lungs. This is not a minor illness. This is a serious killer. And the fact that Fox News is reporting delays in medical evacuations while people were dying aboard a vessel in the Atlantic should be alarming to every single person who has ever booked a cruise holiday. Here's what I keep coming back to. The WHO has been reforming its emergency response protocols since the COVID debacle. We were told the lessons had been learned. We were told the systems were stronger. And yet, when a rare virus appears on a cruise ship, we get delayed evacuations and carefully worded situation reports. Douglas Murray is absolutely right when he argues that bureaucratic process has become a substitute for actual competence in our international institutions. The deeper problem is structural. Commercial cruise ships operate in international waters under flags of convenience, meaning the accountability architecture is deliberately fragmented. Nobody is clearly in charge. And when nobody is clearly in charge, people die in the gaps between jurisdictions. That is the hard truth here, and I don't think the industry or the WHO is going to volunteer it.
But Sophia, isn't that a bit unfair? Getting critically ill patients off a ship in the middle of the Atlantic is genuinely difficult. There are real logistical constraints here that aren't simply about institutional failure. And James, what's your take on this?
Well, look, Sophia is right about the jurisdictional fragmentation, but I think she's letting the cruise industry off too lightly by focusing on the WHO. Here's the data that matters. The cruise industry generates roughly $150 billion annually. These are not small operators working on thin margins. They are enormously profitable commercial enterprises that have every financial tool available to invest in onboard medical capability and rapid emergency response infrastructure. The question I want answered is how rodent contamination, or exposure to rodent material, became possible on a commercial vessel carrying paying passengers. That's a basic sanitation and inspection question, and it belongs at the feet of the cruise line first and the port health authorities second. The WHO coordinates responses. It doesn't inspect ships before they sail. That accountability chain runs directly to the company whose vessel this is.
I hear what James is saying, but with respect, that misses the point entirely. Yes, the cruise line has questions to answer. Absolutely. But James is essentially arguing that if we just hold the company accountable after the fact, the system works. It doesn't work. 3 people are dead. The accountability mechanism failed before this happened. At the inspection stage, at the port health stage, at the International Maritime Health Protocol stage, you can find the cruise line. You can sue the cruise line. Those 3 people are still dead. What I'm saying is that the structural gap, the WHO coordinating but no single sovereign authority having clear jurisdiction and rapid response command over a vessel in international waters, that gap needs to be closed with something harder than bureaucratic coordination. It needs clear lines of command, short sentences, fast decisions. That's what saves lives at sea.
Here's what I want to know, and I want both of you to think about the next 6 months, not just the immediate crisis. If this investigation finds that the contamination source reflects a systemic, industry-wide failure, are governments actually going to force reform on an industry this commercially powerful? James, where do you see this going?
The way I see this playing out, there are really 3 possible trajectories. The most likely, unfortunately, is that this becomes a contained tragedy. 3 deaths, a WHO situation report, and industry reassurances that are accepted because the financial pressure to keep cruises sailing is simply too great for any single government to push back against. The more concerning scenario involves this being an Andes-type hantavirus capable of person-to-person transmission. And if that's confirmed, then every passenger who disembarked from that vessel and flew home to a different country becomes a potential dispersed exposure point that public health systems have very limited capacity to track. The risk there is not a pandemic. Hantavirus doesn't have that profile, but it's a distributed case cluster that could reveal exactly how thin our post-COVID surveillance architecture actually is. The third possibility, the one I think we should be pushing for, is that this forces a genuine reckoning with maritime health inspection standards. But I'd put the odds of that at maybe 20%.
Here's what concerns me most, and I completely disagree with James on the probability of meaningful reform, not because I'm more optimistic, but because I'm less optimistic. The cruise industry has lobbyists in every major capital. They helped gut oversight mechanisms in multiple jurisdictions because the economic argument, jobs, tourism revenue, port revenue, is genuinely powerful. The trajectory I fear is this. The investigation produces a report, the report identifies failures, the industry accepts a fine and issues new internal guidelines. And 18 months from now, we are in exactly the same position when something else goes wrong on another vessel. What history tells us is that rare pathogen events in novel settings always expose gaps that everyone knew existed and nobody was willing to close because the political cost of confronting a powerful industry outweighed the statistical risk of a rare event. Until the calculus changes, until the reputational and financial cost of a failure like this exceeds the cost of genuine reform, the gaps stay open.
Sobering analysis from both of you. Sophia Reeves, James Chen, thank you. 3 people lost their lives on what should have been a holiday of a lifetime, and right now the institutions charged with making sure it never happens again are issuing situation reports. One thing's certain, somebody in the cruise industry's executive suite is not sleeping well tonight, and frankly, they shouldn't be.